Move on to item 9, which is a review of the Constitution to permit the Audit Committee to approve the final accounts pack, including the annual statement of accounts. I'd like to invite Councillor David Minery, the portfolio holder for Finance and Corporate Support, to present the report and move the report and recommendations be received and agreed. Councillor Minery.
Thank you, Speaker. Yes, it gives me great pleasure, in fact, to move this. What is a really small alteration to the Constitution, but one that makes absolute sense. I think we've just spent quite a few minutes now discussing on the previous item the good work that the Audit Committee does and internal audit does. The Audit Committee go through everything that the auditors produce with a fine-tooth comb in much greater detail than it is ever possible for the full council meeting in this sort of format, or whether we're all in the same room, to actually do. The approval by council, if we're honest, is little more than just a rubber stamp, whereas approval of the accounts by the Audit Committee is very, very meaningful. And to me, it makes perfect sense, given the ever-changing timetable that we're working under, and given the fact that the council timetable is fairly rigid and cannot be easily changed. It makes perfect sense to approve this modest change to the Constitution, which delegates responsibility for approving the accounts and the annual report to the Audit Committee. It really is as simple as that. I won't dwell on it any longer, but I will formally move the recommendation that the Audit Committee be given responsibility for approving the final accounts pack, including the statement of accounts for the financial year 2019-20 onwards, and that the detailed changes to the Constitution approved in Appendix A are adopted. I formally move.
Thank you. And is that seconded, Councillor Nutting?
Yes, Councillor Peter Nutting. I'll second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. I've had so far one councillor indicate to speak, and that's Roger Evans. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Speaker. This one, I do want to speak quite seriously on it, and I understand advice has been given by Grant Thornton recently about this subject. I'm not sure quite what the advice is, but in the last few days, I think there has been advice from Grant Thornton, our external auditor. Be interested to hear what that advice is, but we do object to this amendment to the Constitution, and we will wish to vote against it if it is pushed by to a vote. But I think this is a step too far. I think the council needs to show its support for the Audit Committee, and it can best do this via the council meeting. So I would want this still to come to council meetings as it does at present. And I don't know what Grant Thornton said, but obviously our external auditors are making comment somewhere on this item. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So yes, we would want to vote, and I'm saying that I will be voting against it. Thank you.
Okay, well, I've got nobody else who has indicated presently to speak. Okay, I will go then back to Councillor Nutting, who seconded and withheld his right. Councillor Nutting.
Thank you, Speaker. It's Peter Nutting. I just wonder if Councillor Evans has actually read the report, because if he goes to page 35, 6.4, it does say the external auditor, Grant Thornton, have been consulted and have no objections. So I'm not quite sure if he's read the report or not, but it makes perfect sense for the good running of this council that we actually do this. So yeah, I'm happy with the report, and I hope the council will agree it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Minery.
Chairman, Councillor Roger Evans.
Roger, sorry, you've had your moment. I've moved to the seconder who's withheld their right. I'm now going back to the portfolio holder.
This is a question of fact, Chairman, a question of fact, which was just stated by the leader of the council.
Okay, I will allow it quickly, please.
I have in my hand a copy of a report from our Section 151 officer, which states that I think we will be reverting back to everything going to council in the future anyway, based on the proposed changes Grant Thornton highlighted last week. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you for raising that. I will now go back to Councillor David Minery. Councillor Minery.
Sorry, Speaker, I was having trouble unmuting the microphone, and yes, I mean, the paragraph 6.4. There are 2 points I want to make, really. Paragraph 6.4 in the report says, and I quote, "The external auditor, Grant Thornton, have also been consulted upon this and have no objections." So that is fairly clear. It is disturbing, Speaker, to me as the portfolio holder, that the leader of the Liberal Democrat group seems to have in his possession a document that suggests something different to what the report contains. I certainly have not seen such a document, and I do take exception to this little stunt of saying that something is available, saying this, that and the other, when nobody else has got a chance to see it or read it or respond to it. And I trust, Speaker, that you will in future rule appropriately on such statements. I have nothing else to say.
Okay. Well, obviously it has been debated. We will be taking a vote on this using the poll feature in the chat function. So please do vote when it appears. Let me say, though, there was some concern last time with people who felt that their vote had not been included. Votes on each subject will stay open for up to 30 minutes, but we rule on it when it's legal and very clear which way the vote is going, because I'm sure nobody would wish to wait for up to 30 minutes to find out the result. So we will be taking a vote on this. It will appear in your chat box. I've got my own laptop this time. So as soon as that appears, if members could vote, I will be grateful. Thank you. Okay, I think that's sufficient time. I'm going to hand over to the monitoring officer, Claire Porter, to say what's happened with the voting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To date, it is showing that there are 33 votes in favour, 7 against and 3 abstentions. Clearly, as you've indicated, Mr. Speaker, more votes will come through, but at this point it's very clear that the majority of council are in favour of this.
Thank you, councillors. So that is passed. We'll move on to item 10, which is the 20-mile-an-hour speed restriction outside of schools. I'm going to invite Councillor Steve Davenport, the portfolio holder for Highways and Transport, to present the report and move the report with its recommendations be received and agreed. Councillor Davenport.
Yes, hi. Good morning still. Right, you've got this report in front of you. At the meeting on December the 21st, 19, Councillor Dan Morris, a Conservative caring councillor, put this to council, this motion to council, to include 20 mile an hour outside all the schools in the county. And this report, sorry, it's been late because of this, again, due to COVID, but it's here now. We have 150 schools, 126 sites that need to be looked at. There is lots of benefits. You've got the report in front of you, but this is going to take a lot of consultation. So they're on recommendations 2.1a, where a consultation with each individual's school, governing bodies, senior leaders, local members, communities, will ensure we get the right decision for each individual school in the county. So this is not a one-size-fits-all. I am going to add to this report a recommendation, an extra recommendation G, and my recommendation in this G is an amendment to the report that the scheme is completed by the end of May 2025. So I'm adding that as an extra recommendation. You've got everything else in front of you, and I propose this to council.
Thank you. And is that seconded? Councillor Morris? Do we have a seconder?
If Councillor Morris is having a problem, I'm happy to second it on his behalf, on behalf of the Conservative group. It's Councillor Peter Nutting.
Thank you, Councillor Nutting. That is seconded by you. Thank you. Okay. I have a number of speakers who have indicated thus far, and I will start with Councillor Kevin Turley.
Thank you, Speaker. It's only a quick one.
Actually, Kevin, can I just stop you there? Claire's just reminded me that we have actually had through an amendment proposed, so we will have to take the amendment first. There are actually two of them, one from Tony Parsons and one from Councillor Roger Evans. So I will need to take those first. My apologies. It only came in on a piece of paper to me this morning, which Claire did give me, but I forgot that I had. So, Councillor Tony Parsons, you are proposing an amendment. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Tony Parsons. Yeah, I welcome in the whole this report, which follows, I think, two motions that have come to council from backbench members, certainly the one from Councillor Dan Morris in December 2019, and I think both of those motions received cross-party support. So I don't see this as a party political issue. My concern with the paper as it was first published, before Councillor Steve Davenport mentioned the amendment that he was going to bring to item 2.1g, was the length of time in which any plans for either 20-mile-an-hour limits or school streets or whatever would take to put in place, because of the way that it was going to be budgeted. And I think that the final scheme may not have taken place before 2028, 2029. Now, my view is that that is too long for health and safety matters, which are protecting our children. I didn't know that Dr. Graham Tate was going to raise the public question that he did today, where he talked about issues that have arisen over the previous 7 years, but I wouldn't want that to continue for another 9 years whilst we got all of these things into place. I think once the school governing bodies, senior leaders and local members have agreed proposals, that they should be dealt with more speedily than that. I'm suggesting that that work should be completed by the end of 2022-23. I note Steve Davenport's amendment to 2025, but I still believe it needs to be actioned before then, although that is much better than the original proposal to 2028-2029. But I would still like my amendment to go to the vote. I've done a back of a fact packet estimate as to what it would cost to get public borrowing to put these measures in place. But I do recognise that if this amendment was to be passed, that it should go back to our financial officers for them to consider its inclusion within a future financial strategy. So my amendment remains, but I am pleased to see the amendment that Councillor Davenport also made to his report.
Okay, now I understand this is going to be seconded by Councillor Pam Mosley, this amendment. Councillor Mosley, is that correct? And are you going to speak now or withhold your right?
Councillor Pam Mosley speaking. Yes, I am supporting this motion, this amendment to the motion, and would like to speak now if that's okay. We're advised that police data shows that there were in the last 3 years 11 accidents outside the schools of Shropshire, 3 classed as serious and 8 slight in severity. And we're also told that a review of data shows there's no evidence that those killed or seriously injured in these accidents at start and end of school days were speed related. However, I suspect that what hasn't been possible to know is the number of near misses and minor accidents that don't get reported to the police. And clearly we can't know what these are, but I do suspect there are quite a large number of these. And if there are accidents which are school related, caused for a variety of reasons, it can be driver error, human error, your children don't always behave quite as safely as you'd like them to, poor and illegal parking outside schools, or just a poor road layout. The outcome for a pedestrian involved in a road traffic accident has to be better if the vehicle is going slower than 30 miles an hour. I mean, 20 miles an hour would make a big difference to that. And while I support the amendment today of G to reduce the time to the end of the programme to 2025, I still support Councillor Parsons in his desire to see this programme brought forward to finish in 22-23. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, good, thank you. Now, I've got a number of people that indicated that they wish to speak to the original, and I have a few people who have indicated to speak to the amendment. So the list of people I have who indicated before the amendment came through were Kevin Turley, Julian Dean, Simon Harris, Nigel Harting, Heather Kidd and Dan Morris. I would ask those councillors if they wish to speak to the amendment or the original to indicate now, and I will add you to the list, which currently has Councillor Viv Parry, then Councillor Peter Nutting, Councillor Alan Mosley and David Basmer, who've all indicated they wish to speak to the amendment. So although you've indicated to speak, please let us know if you wish to speak to the amendment. And I'll start with Viv Parry. Viv.
Thank you. I really agree with 20 mile an hour limits outside schools. I believe that unfortunately we do have some 20 mile an hour limits. We've got one on Old Street where I live. We've been trying to get a pedestrian crossing there for 7 years now. But the thing with it is people ignore it completely. They come at very high speeds going uphill and downhill. And something needs to be done about it. And I'm afraid the police are not going to enforce it. So what is going to happen with speed limits on main roads outside schools? I know that quite a few parents walk their children to school, but the main thing also is the parking situation. The parking outside St Lawrence's School, we have housing right up to the entrance of the school. People still insist on dropping their children directly outside. There are no signs to say, please drop your children off on either road, which is by Smithfield Car Park, which there's plenty of space.
Cut across, please, Viv? And
yes, I'm sorry.
We're actually talking about
when
the
you've
20
got
mile
two,
an hour,
when
not
you've got,
cars. Viv, please, if you'd let me. If
but
we could stick to the
parking is
20
on
mile
the
an hour zone as opposed to parked cars, we have a
Yes.
number of speakers on this, and I do
Yeah.
mean quite a good number now. So parking is not what we are debating. The 20
No, but
mile an hour
parking
speed
is
zone
on the, if you look at it on page 53, parking outside school is on there. And that is all I'm saying. When people have got 3 or 4 cars, how can people drop their children off directly outside the school? Something needs to be done to encourage parents to not drive so fast on main drives going into near the schools, and also people in the town not to drive so fast. And that is what I'm saying. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Nutting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's Peter Nutting. I just want to bring another angle into this whole debate, and it's important to the amendment as well. We've got to consider as a council whether we're looking to put advisory speed limits in or mandatory speed limits in, and it's not clear from any of the comments from the other groups, but the Conservatives did discuss this at their group meeting, what we're trying to achieve, because it makes a lot of difference to how quickly we can implement some of the schemes. If we accept they're advisory and purely voluntary, it's a lot easier to put signage up saying 20 mile an hour or whatever, or parking restrictions, but they're not enforceable in law. If we want to go for a mandatory scheme, which is enforceable in law, you have to go through quite a big legal process, which takes time and money. So it's not clear to me what the other groups are actually trying to achieve. The report is, and the money in the report is based on the idea of doing it mandatory, and they become a legal issue. Now, I think there is then a question of whether the police will actually implement those rules or not. But I think it's important that we all understand what we're doing. I'm against the amendment because I think what was said with G covers the thing that Tony Parsons is trying to achieve. But I would ask the other groups to be clear what they are trying to actually want to look at. If you go around the country and look at other councils, nearly all the schemes that have been implemented are advisory. We already have quite a number of mandatory schemes around Shropshire where there is legal power to enforce some of the speed limits. So it's just another thought, but I'm against the amendment. I think it's totally unnecessary now that the recommendations have been amended. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Mosley. Councillor Mosley.
Thanks, Speaker. I very much applaud what Tony and Pam said in supporting the amendment, and just to emphasise how pleased everyone was when the original motions went through more or less unanimously, but then how disappointed people have been to hear that it's going to take so long to implement these. Some advance, obviously, in what Steve Davenport has said earlier about changing that timescale, but I and we believe that this should be done quicker. In terms of what Peter has just questioned, it depends on the local circumstances. Just as the report indicates that in some areas, specific school streets could be put in place. In others, it may be 20 mile an hour. In some, mandatory, and in others, perhaps advisory, with appropriate signage that flashes to indicate that people need to slow down. It is, it's not one size fits all on this. It does depend on the local circumstances and the local road configuration and what the school and the parents and the local members think about it. But please, can we adopt this amendment? We've all accepted that these things need doing. We've all accepted that children's safety is at risk. We've all accepted that this is something that ought to be put in place. Let us do it quickly. Let us not get embroiled in disputes about schools which are top priority, which are lower priority, that sort of thing. All schools which have a need should be looked at urgently and schemes put in place with some urgency. Please accept the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor David Vasner. Councillor Vasner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I would like to support this amendment. I think it relates mainly to 20-mile-per-hour zones and outside schools, and I agree very much with what Councillor Mosley has just said. There is an urgency we need to put into this, and officers need to take this on and develop it as soon as quickly as they possibly can. So I'm hoping that people will support this amendment, and as far as school streets are concerned, that people will support my amendment, which follows.
Thank you. And the last person who has indicated at present to speak to the amendment, Councillor Julian Dean.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I'm speaking reluctantly against the amendment, and I have to say, having read the report, I feel frustrated, and I feel the frustration of the officers given the length of the report. We voted down 20 miles an hour as an area-wide thing, and then we voted for 20 miles an hour around schools, and we voted for school streets. And I just think we're getting ourselves into a right old mess. The question is, what's the purpose of these interventions? If it's safety for children walking and cycling, and it's about encouraging them to do so, and it's about reducing pollution and congestion and improving health and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, then we risk spending time and money on interventions that simply don't have the desired effect. If the majority of a child's school journey remains outside the area affected, there's little additional safety or incentive to walk or cycle. School street interventions will of course create a clean air bubble and safety bubble, and in some places this could make perfect sense, but it should be noted that the child who benefits most from this is the one driven to the edge of the area. The child who has walked or cycled has still had to deal with the risk and pollution for the majority of their route. And what about the 80% of child time on a bicycle or walking in the street that has nothing to do with the journey to and from school? What about the school holidays and weekends? And the most recent fatality associated with the school in my area took place a mile away from the school. Meanwhile, over 50 councils have now adopted the shift from 30 to 20 as the default, with exceptions then granted where active travel is well segregated. The UN is calling for it, the Institute of Public Health is calling for it, the Welsh Synod has voted overwhelmingly for 20-mile-an-hour zones. Cheshire East, as I understand, went through this same sort of process, costing several million to adopt 20 mile an hour in spots, and has now gone for a default 20 mile an hour instead. And area-wide schemes are enforceable. Self-enforcing, as quoted in the conclusions of the report, only applies to zones and stretches. But when you do area-wide 20 mile an hour, you can enforce it. Avon and Somerset Police issued 23,000 notices of intended prosecutions for 20 mile an hour infringements in 2018. We're continuing to fly in the face of the Institute of Public Health, the UN, the whole of Wales in resisting the frankly inevitable. So I'm afraid I can't support these amendments, and instead I ask the executive, the cabinet, to bite the bullet and come forward with proposals that will signal to Shropshire residents that we're serious about reversing the existing transport hierarchy so that walking, wheeling, scootering, cycling become the first choice modes of travel for short journeys for children and for adults. In fact, for everybody between 80 and 30, as said in many of the documents, by bringing forward plans for area-wide replacements of 30 with 20 in urban and areas and in our built-up villages. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I've got nobody else that has indicated that they wish to speak to the amendment. I presume now I go back to Councillor Parsons, who proposed it.
No,
no,
Mr. Speaker, it will be the original proposer of the motion, Councillor Davenport.
All right, so he's going to go back and speak about the amendment.
He can have the right to.
Okay, Councillor Davenport, is there anything there that you wish to say on the amendment as opposed to the original report?
No, just go to a vote.
Okay, well, we will move to the vote then. We are voting on the first amendment, which was from Councillor Tony Parsons and seconded by Councillor Pam Mosley. Please look for the box and vote to whether you support the amendment or whether you don't. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the votes cast so far are 33 votes against the amendment, 19 for the amendment and 2 abstentions. So it appears at this point in time that the majority have voted against the amendment.
Okay, so should we move on? Okay, well, you heard what Claire Porter, the Monitoring Officer, said, so we will move on to then the second amendment, which is down on my paper as having been put forward by Councillor Roger Evans, but I understand it's going to be Councillor David Basma. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Speaker.
All right, Councillor Basma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Basma speaking. There's always been quite extensive debate about this, so I'll try and be quick. I was very disappointed when the original motion was passed that we didn't have a report going immediately to Cabinet. Given the COVID-19 and also the the dangers that some children do face outside our schools, I thought this warranted being dealt with extremely quickly, and therefore I was extremely disappointed about the fact that it's been brought to Council at this time, and I think we could have been doing something before then. My amendment, what it does is it deals particularly with school streets and the issues that we could do, the things that we could do now. School streets is a way in which create, as Councillor Dean explained, it creates a bubble outside schools, basically, a safe bubble. There are limits to it, but it does create a safe bubble, and we can do this immediately. It's a matter of putting up signs and using the emergency legislation that's presently in place for emergency traffic regulation orders to achieve this. This is something that we can do, and we ought to be reviewing that and looking at places where it can be done immediately, and we can start working on this particular policy now. What worries me is that this report really is about 20 mph speed limits. It's not really about about school streets, and really school streets should be the overarching policy, and it's one aspect of that is 20 mph limits outside schools. I would say to Councillor Dean that yes, I very much agree with him about the need for 20 mile speed limits throughout. But you have to work with what is, and I think that this policy is one which can generate a lot of support from other councillors, and I hope that people will support it today. Just on the answer to Councillor Nutting's query about what we feel about 20 mph limits, we would like those to be advisory, and I'm sorry that this wasn't made clear earlier. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And I understand that's going to be seconded by Councillor Roger Evans. Roger, you wish to speak now, I understand?
Yes, please, Mr. Speaker. Yes, please, Mr. Speaker. It's Councillor Roger Evans from the Longdon Division. Disappointed that some of this is here again. I fully support 20 mph at schools, outside schools, advisory, whatever we can do first, and we can follow that up later. But I also note in the minutes of the council meeting, which have been agreed in July, the following statement was made. This council agrees to follow government guidance and work collaboratively with councillors, schools and local partners to A, swiftly identify those schools in the county that could put a school street scheme in place. B, have school streets in place at 3 schools by the first day of the new school term in September, taking advantage of experimental traffic orders and new statutory guidance over fast-tracked traffic regulation orders. C, introduce measures to promote walking and cycling in those schools that are not suitable for a school street scheme. Please note, September start a school term, 3 schemes should have been in place. This council made a decision. Can I ask the cabinet member, portfolio holder, why this has not been actioned? Why this again is before the council when it was only discussed a few weeks ago? There is a 6-month rule where council makes a decision. It should not come back to council again. It made a decision about safe streets, and here we are again. We And I think everybody on this council takes safety of our children seriously. Please ensure that others do. And I ask you why you have not ensured the council decision has not been implemented. I would hope the previous decision was sufficient, but this amendment states quite clearly what needs to be done. So please, councillors, uphold the decision that was made in July, just a few weeks ago, and support this motion as well. And let's get moving. Let's try and make the road safer and try to even reduce even one accident. We don't want any accidents to our children. So please support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Well, I've had nobody else indicate to speak, so I will move back to the portfolio holder to comment on what has been said with regard to the second amendment. Councillor Davenport.
I have no comment. Well, I will go back to just go to vote, please.
Okay, well then we will move to the vote. Councillors, please look for the box as to whether you wish to support this amendment or whether you wish not to support it. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, of the votes cast so far, there are 13 votes for the amendment, 33 against and 4 abstentions. So the majority of votes are against this amendment. Okay, thank you. Well, we will move back then to the original report as proposed by the portfolio holder, Councillor Davenport, and seconded by Councillor Peter Nutting. It seems like a long time ago. Thank you for your patience, Kevin. I will come to Councillor Kevin Turley first, then Councillor Simon Harris, Councillor Heather Kidd, Councillor Dan Morris and Councillor Roger Evans. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Speaker. Councillor Kevin Turley, Shifnal North. I'll keep this brief. I have sent an email off to Councillor Davenport with various points from a resident in Shifnal. The key thing really from my perspective is whatever we bring into force, we really need the backing of the various police forces and officers to actually sort of strengthen up any traffic orders and the likes that are put in place. At the moment we're struggling to sort of keep traffic at the 30. If we're going to go forward with this and push forward with this, we desperately need the support of the police and other officers to actually enforce things going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Harris.
Thank you very much. Councillor Simon Harris from Broseley. Steve and I have, well, I definitely know I have received the 130 signature petition. We are on, Broseley's on the list for one of the accidents, which happened just down the road from the school. We have a road that surrounds the school and is ideal for a vast amount of improvement for road safety and a 20-mile-an-hour speed restriction. One of the things I would like to ask is Steve Davenport would kindly come to Broseley and see the road for himself and put his name behind the restriction like I know he wants to, because when Steve first took over as portfolio holder, this 20 mile an hour speed restriction outside schools was one of his determined outcomes before we move on, which I'm really pleased about. And then one other comment. This also sits in well with a project over at Ponsbury that Nick Ignett's doing, to which you talk about funding, and both Broseley Parish and Ponsbury Parish do have a significant amounts of sill available, and I know that both the parishes are keen to move both projects further on, and that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Kidd. Councillor Kidd?
Yes, I'm sorry. It wouldn't unmute.
Right.
Okay. A couple of things about this, and I am pleased that actually this is going forward and is in a slightly quicker time than we anticipated. As road safety is a priority for our Police and Crime Commissioner, I'm surprised that we haven't managed to put any leverage in on him already to actually help aid this and take this forward. So I would suggest that maybe we do that, and I gather he might be up for election next year. On top of that, the devil is always in the detail on all of these things, and with any road improvements, the criteria for prioritisation is always the thing that actually is totally opaque. There's lots of things you could use for prioritisation in this report, but actually how they're scored and how this goes ahead needs to be absolutely transparent so that we can all see. Could I also get you to all note that actually in the rural areas, many accidents are never ever reported by the police unless there's personal injury. So on many places, and certainly outside my schools, there will be near misses where people's brake lights, there's been damage to the car, but the police won't come out, they won't come and look at it, and they never note it. So we have a significant problem with all of that. But if you ask highways how often they've been to collect up bits of brake lights and glass on the road, then you may get a better figure of how close some of these things have actually been. So I welcome it being shorter, but I would also welcome seeing a transparent criteria for prioritisation and actually us not using the police data because it's not accurate.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Morris, if you're back.
Thank you.
You are.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Apologies for my technical issue. Thank you also to Councillor Nutting for stepping in and seconding. Throughout my interactions with residents in my ward, the #1 issue I come across is road safety, particularly outside schools. There are 3 primary schools in Burnell, Longler, Condover and Dorrington. 2 years ago, I had a petition handed to me with over nearly 300 signatures requesting 20 mile an hour speed limit outside the school. Just last week, a resident from Dorrington who has a child at Dorrington School got in touch to say there aren't enough signs along the road and perceived speeds down Church Road are too high. This report deals with these issues through consultation with schools, boards of governors, local members and members of the community. It has a thorough examination of the data and then also design advice. It specifies looking at parking behaviour, which is a key factor of school road safety. The substantive part of the motion stems from my comprehensively supported motion in December 2019 to support the principle of 20 mile an hour speed limits outside all schools. I am proud that it is a Conservative motion that is driving this change and urge all members to support Councillor Davenport's slightly amended motion to speed up the implementation to May 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got 3 councillors now, and then I'm minded to call it to an end. We've been kicking it around for some time, and I think just about everybody's had a chance to speak. So Councillor Roger Evans, then Councillor Alan Mosley, then Councillor Dave Tremlay. Councillor Roger Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to support this motion, but really we need to do something now. If anybody wishes to see a speed limit outside school, please go to Minsterley. I was the county councillor for that area a few years ago, and we put it in there. And as far as I'm aware, it works. And that is a good example for it. I also would point out that the Police and Crime Commissioner has put a £280,000 grant available for bids, which have to be in by the end of September, to do with roads and speed and things like that. So maybe the council can actually work in partnership. I know some of my parish councils are also working in partnership and using SIL, because looking at schools and how that can be introduced. But I come back to a point I made previously in today's meeting, and that is why the cabinet member has not seen fit to put in place the motion that was agreed cross-party, Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrats, all working together, that was agreed at the July Council, which said that school streets would, or some examples of school streets would be put in place by the beginning of September when the schools restarted. Heard no comment. It's totally missing from the report. Although it talks about school streets, there's nothing about the motion that council agreed. Are we going to say the cabinet members can ignore what this council says? No, they shouldn't. They are answerable to council. We made that decision, and there it is in black and white by the beginning of September. Some school streets should have been put in place, and really to pass no comment is not satisfactory. I would like to know why it has not been implemented or even any comment made about it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Mosley.
I think it's a shame that Councillor Morris should bring the fact that he is a Conservative member into this debate and highly evidence it. And in fact, I see that's preceded lots of comments today on otherwise non-political elements. In actual fact, of course, it was opposition members who brought in proposals for widespread 20-mile-an-hour limits in residential areas, and Conservative councillors who voted against those holistic opportunities for doing something serious about road safety. I'm not one to normally talk parish politics in these sort of meetings. I don't think there's any place in individual claims to do this and that at this forum. But I would just say that there's some history here in terms of safer schools policies, and two schools in my area which exist side by side had a plan that was going to be implemented until the cuts in the highways budget implemented by the Conservative administration obviously put paid to them. So I hope that as these are oven ready and were planned and were and have been discussed at length, that these can be put forward as something that could go ahead very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor David Tremlett.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. Really just to bring up the point that at the last meeting of the Road Safety Task and Finish Group, I did suggest that we work in partnership with the PCC, the Police and Crime Commissioner, because myself, Mike Wood and Roger Evans, and in fact William Parr, actually sit on that panel. And it was agreed by the chair of the Police and Crime panel to actually work together with Shropshire Council, to which end I put him in contact with the committee officer, Daniel Webb. Nothing actually was actually picked up on that. Nothing was actually done, because I raised it again on Monday. We had the last meeting on Monday just gone, where in fact again the chair Stephen McKay actually suggested and encouraged us to us Shropshire members actually to carry forward the wish that we work in concert again with the Police and Crime panel, because there is concern. This is a concern that goes across all the counties within the West Mercia area, and everybody wants to see something done about it. But it really is just to raise that point. In fact, to answer Heather's suggestion that in fact we raise the issue with the Police and Crime Commissioner. It is as anybody has read the last Crime Commissioner's report, very much on his radar, and he is, in fact, as Roger has mentioned, offered a significant grant to such ends. So yeah, it is being carried forward. I'll reassure everybody that it is being carried forward. But as I said, it was the last meeting of the Police and Crime Panel was on Monday. I've spoken to Daniel since, and it'll probably be raised again, and I'll put it in writing both to Daniel, who's the committee officer, and to Julian Dean, who's the chair of the Road Safety Task and Finish Group. But it is very much on the, if you like, penciled into the agenda. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now, some time ago in the distant past, I think Councillor Peter Nutting seconded and reserved his right to speak. Councillor Nutting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be quick. I think most of the debate has been sensible. I think we're going to reach a sensible conclusion. I'd just like to add one little thing into it. I walked the dog around Radbrook and Bowbrook Meadows, the new estate. And on Bowbrook Meadows, there's a sign about speed limits that has been designed by local children. And I actually think it's a very effective sign. And actually including children in designing some of the signage outside the schools can be a very effective way forward, especially if they're advisory signage rather than mandatory. So I just ask that that be considered as part of the package when we move forward. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport.
Yeah, okay, just to quickly run through some of the questions that have been asked. Vid Parry, a major part of this consultation is parking. I do think that this is extremely important, as my inbox fills up with this problem. Peter Nutting, designing my thoughts on this are each individual school gets involved, the children design the signs, and actually appealing to people's sense of safety, drivers, motorcyclists, cyclists against these schools. So having the pupils to be involved in their signs, absolutely fundamental to this. Alan Mosley, I did say one size doesn't fit all, and absolutely totally agree with you with that. Roger, I think I mentioned that this has been held up with COVID. None of us could help that, and I do apologise. Kevin Turley, yes, we have been emailing each other, and I understand your problems. We've been discussing this. Simon Harris, yes, I'm happy to visit Broseley again. Lovely place to go. Roger, this paper includes at 3.5 the streets closing, and so this is part of this document. Again, I apologize for it being late. We have had other problems. Alan, yes, I want to move, Alan Mosley rather, I want to move forward with this as quickly as possible. Yes, I do. That's why I brought it down to 2025 as an end date, not a start date. So I'd like to start moving on this as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. We will now move to a vote on this, as we've had the amendments. So I'm going to take a vote on this. I would remind councillors that the recommendations now include also recommendation G. If the box comes up, please vote. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the votes cast so far
are 46 votes for the motion, 0 against and 0 abstentions, so the majority are in favour.
Thank you. Okay, that report and the recommendations have passed. Thank you, councillors. Now, before we move on to the next item, as promised at the beginning of the meeting, we've done exactly 2 hours, so we will have a recess for 10 minutes. I would ask councillors absolutely to turn off make sure their microphones are on mute, because the public meeting will still continue in our absence. The public will still be able to hear what you are doing. I would also recommend possibly turning off your video link as well, so that your fellow members don't have to watch what you're doing. It is 12 o'clock. We will reconvene promptly at 10 past. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, it's 10 past. I hope you're all back, and we have a few moments to take care of whatever you need to take care of. We'll move on to item 11, which is the Green Acres Farm Supported Living Scheme. I invite Councillor Carroll, portfolio holder for Adult Social Services and Climate Change, to present the report, move the report and the recommendations to be received and agreed. Councillor Carroll.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present this report. I'm delighted to have been able to have brought this forward. It's a very much needed scheme. We currently don't have any of this specialist supported living accommodation for adults with severe learning difficulties in Shropshire, which means that for the small number of individuals that we do have, that we have a responsibility for the care of, we end up having to commission these bed spaces outside of county, which can in some circumstances lead to these people being sent hundreds of miles away from their homes, their families, their friends, their support network, which is not conducive to good quality of life. So what we're bringing forward here is for 8 units, 6 of them 1 bedroom, 2 of them will be 2 bedroom units. And that will be at Green Acres Farm, which is a thriving day centre for adults with learning difficulties in a working farm setting in the North Shropshire countryside. Beautiful setting, and it already has a base of support there for these people. What they'll receive while they're there is 24-hour round-the-clock care. They'll have one-to-one support, and in cases where they need it, greater than one-to-one support. This works financially for the council. The business model stacks up. It will cost us far less to provide this service than buy the beds wherever in the country there are vacancies at the time we need them. But actually, the main reason for doing this isn't the financial reason. The main reason for doing this is that by bringing these Shropshire residents back to Shropshire to receive their care, we bring them back closer to their friends, their family, their support networks. It increases their quality of life. Now, I'm conscious of the time, Speaker, but there is one other aspect of this scheme that I'd like to bring to Council's attention, and that is the intent in construction. What we intend to deliver, how we intend to deliver this project, is that it will be a fully off-site precision engineered buildings. They will be, the groundworks will be done on site, but the buildings will be built off site in a factory. They will be brought to Green Acres once they've been assembled and installed to reduce the disruption to the local community. They will be built to Passive House standard, which is an exemplar in terms of sustainability and in terms of running costs. It's a really exciting and well thought out scheme. We've been engaging with the local member, with the parish council, we will be engaging with the local community more widely now if council approve this project. So I have pleasure in bringing forward recommendations 2.1 to 2.4 and hoping to receive council support. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. And is it seconded, Councillor Barsley?
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. I'd like to formally second but reserve my right.
Very good. Well, I've thus far one councillor who has indicated to speak, Councillor Heather Kidd. Heather?
This is really great scheme. I'm not going to speak against it. I can't see that there's anything not to like in it, and I have a resident here who goes to Greenacres itself now and has a really good and supported experience there. The and wonderful quality of accommodation, better than actually most of the residents of Shropshire, I might say. So what I would like to know though is that we've always had great store by personalised budgets and people being able to choose. Do all of the people who come here to live there have to use Greenacres, or can they choose to go somewhere else for other experiences? And that's my only question, really. It is a great scheme and well done.
Thank you. I had nobody else indicate to speak. I'm looking at the Chief Executive just to see if anybody has slipped in at the last minute. Nope. No, in which case I will come back to Councillor Barsley, who reserved his right. Councillor Barsley.
Thank you, Speaker. Nick Bardsley, I'm the local councillor for Ryton and Baschurch, and this Greenacres scheme is at the southern end of Baschurch Parish. I want to commend the portfolio holder and Andy Begley and his whole team for the report. I want particularly to commend them for the process they've adopted and are now following. It's been clear from the start that they want to work in partnership with the local parish council and the local community. We've already had initial meetings. We had a very successful site meeting a few weeks ago, to which both parish councillors and I were invited. We're closely involved in the scheme. There will be a presentation, I think, at the next parish council meeting early next month, and neighbours will be taking part in that remote meeting as well. The buildings and the associated development may well not be where they appear on the site plan on page 13 of the feasibility report. I hope when the planning application is submitted, probably not until November, that it will be much closer to the existing farm buildings. There's a brownfield, if I can use that term, area just to the north of the existing farm buildings, which has two advantages. First of all, it's well screened, and the site plan shows a very open field which isn't well screened. But more important, Speaker, the site that we looked at the site meeting, closer to the farm buildings, is much more accessible for residents so that they can get to the farm buildings and take part in the activities, and that's envisaged in paragraph 1.9 of the report. I just want to finish very quickly, Chairman, by saying many councillors will have, in more normal times, have on Wednesdays usually bought eggs, rhubarb, other farm supplies as they've left Shire Hall or come into Shire Hall. Those farm supplies and those people who served you come from Greenacres Farm. I'm sure in time you'll be meeting some of the new residents at that same place. I look forward to that. I hope all councillors will. I hope very much that you will approve this scheme. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Back finally to Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, and thank you both for the positive comments that you've made. They're very well appreciated, and I'll make sure they get back to the officers who've been doing all the hard work on this. But there are a couple of questions there which I can answer. Firstly, Heather, you asked whether using their personalised budgets, the the residents of the proposed new properties would have to use Green Acres or could choose to use other facilities. The choice, as they are personalised budgets, is theirs. We would hope that they would at least in some way engage with Green Acres where they can, because the support at Green Acres is specialised to people with learning difficulties. However, they are not bound to access Green Acres Day Centre as an activity. In some cases, unfortunately, it just wouldn't be possible for them anyway because of the nature of their conditions. But the choice at the end of the day will be down to the resident whether they wish to make use of that service or another service. They are two separate services on the same site. Coming on to Councillor Barsley, and I'd like to especially thank Nick for his support as local member and providing the links that he has to the parish council and the local community. Just to emphasise what he said, the site with it, the location within the site in the feasibility study is purely illustrative for the purposes of bringing forward the business case. The actual site will be in the planning application when that is brought forward. We have taken on board everything that Nick and the parish council said about the suitability of the alternative location they proposed. In principle, provided there are no technical reasons why we couldn't use the field that they proposed as opposed to the one in the feasibility study, we are perfectly happy to accommodate the more local knowledge they have of the area and use that site. We have the project manager is meeting with the architects this week to discuss how feasible, how possible it will be within the budget to use that field as opposed to the one in the feasibility study. And I will of course keep you as the local member and the parish council informed as of the progress. I think that covers everything, Speaker, so I will ask for council support.
Thank you. Okay, well, as per some of the earlier debates that we had, there is no real dissent sensed by myself. So I would propose to accept the recommendations of this report on behalf of all of you. But if there is somebody who wishes not to, or wishes for it to be actually formally voted on, we'll say that by silence that everybody agrees with this. Are we happy? Good. Claire, you happy with that?
Yes, Speaker.
All right, good. We'll move on to item 12, and thank you very much.